as whoever know or don't know, Grandma is about to be 90 in a couple months, and she is already a long-time talker in Yad Vashem for many, many years to many, many groups. And she also finished this year her book. She wrote about the Holocaust and her own story. That's it. If anyone have any questions and stuff, you can write it on the chat. Grandma, put your face back up. Perfect. Okay, so I'll give the stage to Grandma and she'll start talking. And that's it. I'll mute myself. And good luck, Grandma. We all love you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, whoever's turned in. Welcome, welcome. I'm glad you took time out to listen to me. And I thank my dear grandchildren and children for making this possible. I'm very not knowledgeable, ignorant computer-wise, so they had to guide me step by step every inch of the way. And I hope I'm connected. So welcome, all of you. Some of you have heard me before in previous years, and some not. And whoever is here, welcome. Basically, I want to tell you that I'm fine. Baruch Hashem, I'm going to be 90 years young this December, God willing, if I live that long, Hanukkah time. And I feel in good spirits. I feel in God's hand. Told you, Ori and Malki made this possible with all my other children. And Ori told you that I wrote the book. I wrote the book, which took me 2 whole years to finish, with the constant help of my son and daughter, Leah and Ralph. I mean, Jeffrey and Leah. And they steered me to a good book. It's a short 4-hour read, positive book full of faith of God, which I have from my mother, my late mother, Peppy, who was my remarkable role model and guide. You may ask how I survived. It was many reasons. One of them was God's will. But the main reason also was that I had 2 angels at my side, my mother and my sister, and I was in the middle. They protected me. They protected me every inch of the way, every day of my life. And God helped them that we all 3 survived together at all times. We were never separate. Even though through all the years we could not even admit to being related, much less mother and daughter, because there was a danger to relationships. Part of the process of demoralization by the Germans was to separate loved ones, families, husbands and wives, and male and female, and mother and children, and siblings, and even friends. So we had to hide the fact that we were related and that we were not able. We had to pretend to be able, and I had to pretend to be older than I was and able to work. All of this you read in many books. My book, which took me 2 years to write after the death of my darling husband, I started writing just the year of Shiva. It took me a few months to finish the basic outline, and then it took me 2 years to refine it and make it readable and palatable. And it's a good book. We printed 300 copies. It's called Nourished by Faith. And they are sold, and we are now on our 2nd printing, which will be even more detailed with indexes and everything. Hopefully, after this Mangefa passes us, it will be out in print. And I do have hope, like I always have hope, this will pass. Each one of you are going through now very hard times. I don't know when it will end, but I'm trying to give you hope that it will end, like everything else that was ever bad for Jews, for mankind, will end. It will be a positive near Hashem outcome. And as a result of which we learned a lesson to connect back to our family, to connect back to our loved ones, because right now we are forced to stay indoors and to tend to each other, pay attention to each other. Husband and wives can get to know each other without the distraction of businesses and children and other items. and it might be a lesson to us to connect to basics, to important things in life. I don't want to moralize now. I am here to try and tell you my story on this Yom HaShoah. And I will try to tell you in the time we have that I was a happy child in a happy family. I was not yet 8 years old. I was next to the youngest of a 5 children family, middle class, comfortable Orthodox Jews born in Germany. And German was our language. Religion was our motto. We were all religious and in a positive way. And all of a sudden, one night, my happy life was totally disturbed when in the middle of the night, I was woken up, told to dress and come to the Gestapo headquarters with my mother and siblings. My father was not even there because when he came home and he saw lights in our apartment late at night, he suspected they came to pick him up, which was the rumors that were going around that men and able-bodied people were picked up to labor camps. So he ran away. My mother went upstairs and she confronted the Gestapo upstairs in our apartment. They were waiting for my parents and they said, dress the children, come with us to headquarters. And we were, of course, had to go in the middle of the night and we went to prison and where we met the large part of the Ost-Jewish Jews living in Stettin, Germany at the time, and a great deal of our family was there, extended family, aunts, uncles, and cousins. And I, as a child, was playing on the beds in prison, didn't think very much of it. It was an adventure to me. I was with my mother and my siblings, and the next morning they took us on the train and tried to drop us off at the border of Poland, saying these are not my citizens, they're Polish stateless, and we don't want them. Neither. What? I was interrupted, yes? Anything important?
It's fine, ignore it. If anyone has a question, please write it in the chat in Hebrew or English, and we'll give questions to my grandma later.
Okay, so there we were. Poland didn't want to receive us, which is the story of 1938, October 1938. 1938, although the Nazis were in power from 1935 and the Nuremberg laws were instituted there, making it hard for my parents to have a proper parnose, because my father was a textile wholesaler and he couldn't really deal with Gentiles freely anymore. And it was much more difficult for my parents than I realized, but there was nowhere to go. No country would accept us, not just Poland in 1938, but there were no countries that were open or accessible to Jews. And it was extremely hard to leave. And my mother didn't really want to leave her siblings, her sisters and brother in Stettin. She wanted to stay with them. She was giving birth to my younger, who was years old, in 1933. And by 1935, when I contracted diphtheria from my brother at home, and I was extremely sick because that was a time before penicillin, I could not be admitted to the hospital without extreme intervention of our Jewish pediatrician, Dr. Arnheim, who used connections to get me into the hospital. And my life was saved, but I was very much discriminated against in the hospital in 1935. That was my horrible experience at the age of 5, when I thought I was a pariah. Something was wrong with me because they kept me isolated. I couldn't see my family. I couldn't see anybody. And but my life was saved. So this was my first experience. The next one was when I was sent out of my comfortable bed at home and sent to a strange place. We finally arrived in Poland, and my mother, who was in charge now of her 5 little children, the youngest being 5 years old, had to try and make some kind of arrangements for them. So she was able to get to the city of Radom in Poland, where we spent many years with the Radoman Jews, and they were very nice. And instead of orphanages, they gave us foster homes, if possible, religious foster homes, and we were there. And I have details how I was very unhappy there, and I was unhappy with the family because I wanted to be on my own, or was I disconnected?
No, just the picture, Grandma. Press the video
Somebody's
again.
trying to reach me. I'm gonna if I cancel it, I may lose you. Somebody interfered here with a phone
Cancel
call.
the call. Cancel the call and go back to the picture. Okay.
Okay. So, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can all hear you, Grandma. Talk.
Ori, can you hear me? Okay. We are in Rad. My mother has a room, an older couple who didn't want children, but was glad to give a room to my mother. And I was very unhappy in the family that was trying to be good to me, because I wanted to be with my mother in that one room. I was not yet 8 years old, and I didn't know why I couldn't be in that beautiful room where my mother had plenty of room there. Why couldn't I be with her? And I didn't even think of my siblings, why they all couldn't be with me. And I did have a younger brother who was maybe more needy to have my mother. But we survived in 1938. At the end of the school year, eventually I learned Polish, which I didn't know a word of. My mother didn't know Polish. Nobody knew Polish. We understood somewhat Yiddish because it was similar to German, so we could communicate till we learned Polish. We went to a summer camp in 1938 where we were reunited with my siblings and with my cousins and the people from Stettin, the children, and we had a nice summer 39. And when the war broke out in 39 and the bombs were flying at the end of the summer, the summer crew took off, went back to their homes and left us children alone in camp. And we were stranded there in camp till about October, till my mother finally, with the help of a friend, was able to come and rescue us. And she made with a horse and buggy several trips to bring us children back to Radom. From there, some of my cousins were able to go to England with the English transport, and we were with the Radomer Jews throughout. And then we were ghettoized, to make it brief. We went to the ghettos. The Germans organized all the Jews to go to a smaller area, and we had to live in the ghettos. We had to work. We had to account of our. I lost you. Don't talk to me now. I'm on the phone. Ori?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Again.
I can hear you. Just
Hello?
make sure. I can hear you. Just make sure you're not answering
I don't know.
phone
Somebody
calls.
interrupted me. Anyhow, I'm not going to go into all these details. You don't see me, right?
Right.
No, we don't. Make sure you're going back to the Zoom screen and we can all hear you, so you can continue talking.
Okay, I'll continue talking. I'll make it brief, as brief as I can. We went from the Radom ghetto with the Radom Jews to shop and to workplaces, and we had to be registered to work. Even my 5-year-old brother had to work, and he was a telephone boy, and I was a finisher. My mother, in the meantime, has learned a profession of corseteer, and she was able to sustain us in the ghetto with that. We were lucky enough to be able to find one room in an apartment which had 5 families living in one in each room, and we were very lucky to get them. There's a lot of details to that too, how we were able to get it. Now there were several
Grandma, go back to the screen of the Zoom. We don't see you. We can only hear you.
I know. Somebody interrupted me and it went off the Zoom. Now I might spend a lot of time trying to get back.
Safta, just click on the green bar across the top of your phone, the green bar.
Grandma, go back to the screen. Press twice on the button you have in the bottom and go back to the
Hello?
screen. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
you're on. Okay.
Okay, the phone calls keep interrupting me. Okay, so we are in the shop and we stayed together, we worked in the shop, and my mother, through the profession of corsetier, was able to sustain us, and we had food rations. We were all occupied by working for the German Reich until they, 2 years we were in the ghetto till 42. And each time the ghetto was changed to smaller, and eventually in 1942 they liquidated the Radom ghetto, and we were put to concentration camps where we were separate, men and women. That meant my 2 young brothers were separate, and I went with my mother and sister. And so we went to the camps. We were in 9 camps altogether, different camps. We had different labor, hard labor, all sorts of labor, and deprivation of food, clothing, morals, everything. The only thing that kept us going was my mother's spirit, and she was incredible. She convinced the son Felix, who in the meantime was able to come to America on his 16th birthday all alone, that he would be rescuing us, that he might be in every plane that passed over us to try and come and save us. And we will be rescued on the 15th of April. This was her favorite day. That was her birthday, and with that she kept his birthday, and with that she kept our faith. And it really happened so that on the 15th of April the war was over for us. And on the 15th of April, we came to America. And on the 15th of April, everything good happened. But my grandchildren, and of course, with God's help, we were eventually rescued. The details are in the book, much more of them. And now the hour is running late. I don't want to leave time for questions, but I also would like to make some comments. My grandchildren have asked me different points of interest, which I'd like to address. One early in 1930, probably 36, when my brother still went to German school, one of the biology teachers who didn't know my brother was a good student and a good athlete and looked very Aryan. My brother Felix picked him for an example of a typical Aryan child. What is an Aryan child? A blonde, blue-eyed, well-developed child, and started to sect his body in front of the class. The class knew he was Jewish, so they were cracking up in laughter. And then finally, after the teacher told him to take his shirt off and to take everything, to show his shoulders and his muscles, he told him to continue to take his pants off. That's when my brother ran out of the class, and the class broke into hysterical laughter. After which incident, my mother had to take the boys out of this German high school because they couldn't stay there any longer. And Jewish schools were established for the younger ones, and the Jewish schools were able to have better professors, because those teachers that of higher quality could not stay in their school as Jews to teach, so they had to take positions what was available. So they went to the Jewish schools, even though the grades were so much lower. Our school went to 6th grade only, the Jewish school we attended, the younger ones, and we had very good teachers. That was before 1938. All of this happened to us before Kristallnacht, before 1938. So another thing that my grandchildren would like me to comment on. At the end of the war, we were not liberated by Prince Charming with a kiss on the thing. The Germans ran out of, yes, we were in the gas chambers. That's what I forgot to tell you. At Auschwitz, we three were in the gas chamber, and we were already, people were saying Shema. And I was so frightened. I had my first menstrual flow in the gas chamber while naked, standing like sardines. Women pressed each other, standing up in a room the size, I would say, of a large living room. Hundreds of women squeezed in. And that particular day, a miracle happened. They ran out of cyclone gas. And we had to leave the crematorium alive in Auschwitz in 1943. And my mother was again full of hope. She said both the fact that I had my menstrual flow was a continuation of life, and the fact that God saved us from the crematorium was sure we're going to survive. And she always fed us that positive feeling, we will survive and we will survive. Not just to us two girls, but to all the people around her. At the end of all our travails from each camp, they kept transferring us from camp to camp in order, also part of demoralization. Each new environment created new adjustments, and it wasn't easy. Each time we were moved around, new work, new people, new environment. But they whipped us from camp to camp. We worked in salt mines and coal mines. And we did also menial labor on the roads. What we did in these mines, we were clearing the tracks for the cars that were loading the coals up. And we were working underground at both salt mines and in coal mines. And there was no respect for life of any kind and no consideration. All of which you read and heard is true. So at the end, I said, no Prince Charming came to kiss us and say, this is the end. The Germans ran out of ammunition and cyclone gas, so what they devised was a Totenmarch, which means death march. So they marched us out of the camp in roll of 5 on primitive country roads at very cold weather. It was winter 45, and they whipped us with dogs at speed until we either dropped dead or continued running. And we couldn't take it anymore, the three of us. We devised a plan. We're going to throw ourselves down, pretend to be dead. And for the most part, the people who dropped dead on the roads were just left there, and people kept going. So we rolled into a ditch in order not to be overrun by the people. And we rolled on top of an American scout, a young soldier, who we scared him to death. He had a gun on him. We were lucky he didn't shoot us. And he called for help, and they came and helped us. They finally, American soldiers, with American advance. We were between Russian and American liberators or whatever troops. And they got somebody to speak Yiddish to us, and they placed us in the nearest village with German people. They should take care of us, they should feed us and clean us, and which they had to do. And they did, and they wanted to give us rich food. And there my mother again, with her wisdom, prevented our death, because an awful lot of prisoners died from overeating. Even well-meaning soldiers who gave them chewing gum and candy was too much for their stomach. So my mother did not let any of the rich food get to us. She confiscated us, our food, and she fed us porridge until our stomachs were used to some food, and saved our life even after liberation. So we three were alive. We didn't know anything about my father, about my brothers, nothing. And we made our way to Munich in Germany, because we couldn't stay in that village forever. And there we met American soldiers who steered us to Buchenwald, meaning that in Buchenwald in 1945, April, was the gathering place of Holocaust survivors, where they reunited with the family. And there we met Rabbi Herschel Schachter, who organized a trip to Switzerland, and we went on that trip to Switzerland. 300 surviving children, quote unquote, being the youngest, my mother being the oldest. They made room, Switzerland made room for rehabilitation of 300 children. We spent a year in Switzerland. Switzerland was very hard on us. We could only be admitted with the help of Rabbi Schachter, who went with us, because they wanted children, and Hitler didn't leave any children behind. The youngest children that I was one of the very youngest, and most of them were between the ages of 18 and 20, that age. And we were there on 3 different houses. The Jewish agency prepared us for Palestine, trying to get us into Palestine. We would have gone to Palestine at the time, but we heard our brother Felix, who in the meantime was an American soldier, and prepared papers for us to take us to America to reunite the family. We found out that one of my brothers was alive. The youngest one was taken with a children carrier and transport. I'm trying to make it very brief. We came in, we got our papers on a preferred quota to arrive in America. We didn't go to Palestine at the time because we wanted to reunite the remaining family. And my brother was in America, and he provided for us a very lovely apartment in Brooklyn. And we arrived here. There were 4 of us, my brother Eddie, my mother, my sister, and I, that came on April 15th, 1946 to America after being in Switzerland for a year of rehabilitation. And we built our lives from there on. There's a lot of miracles here along the way that I didn't have time to tell you now. But one of the interesting things is that I never ever spoke about the Holocaust. I couldn't speak about the Holocaust because I really thought that nobody was interested, nobody would believe it, so why talk about it? And when I came here at the age of 15 actually, I went to high school. My brother sent us to high school, and there I have the interesting part about the 3 of us survivors together, mother, sister, and I. We had 3 consecutive numbers on our left inner arm from Auschwitz concentration camp, which is unheard of, the only one that I ever heard of in my whole history here. And the numbers are consecutive, which shows in my book, on the cover of my book, as a matter of fact, is our arms, consecutive numbers. And when I went to high school and I had short sleeves, my friends would ask me, what number do you have on, what is the number on your arm? And those who didn't hear it, you wouldn't believe what I answered. I told them it was my telephone number, and they believed me. They took it as such, and I left it at that. There were no more questions. I felt that this was the shortest answer because the truth they either wouldn't believe or wouldn't really understand. Because in 1946 in America, April 46, nobody knew about anything. At least they didn't seem to know, not my peers. But we were able to rebuild our lives with the help of my brother, my mother, my sister. We all got married and produced lovely children who believe in God. Most everybody is religious, and we were able to, after the war, to get together with our beloved extended family, which I'm very much in touch with till today. And I have two lovely children who build nice families, lovely grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And I'm very grateful for everything. My mother lived till almost 100. She lived a happy life. She was always deeply religious and deeply grateful to God for whatever he dished out to us. And I never did see my father again since 38. So she was the only one who was able to raise us, and she did a beautiful job with God's help. And I better stop here because there's going to be time for question, and you don't have that much time. So go ahead, Ori, organize the questions.
Okay.
I just want to tell you that I want to give you input into now. Please believe that this will pass. It seems the end of the world, the separation and all that. It'll pass. Worse things have passed to us Jews. And this will pass, and we will look at it as an experience which probably God meant us to go through. And I hope that most of us will come through unscathed and undamaged and not lose loved ones. And it will be a better tomorrow. Believe me, if I can believe that positive, then all of you can believe. And I'm looking forward to have a lot of nachas on all my dear grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and looking forward to continuous life. And I'm grateful for every minute that I have. Good luck, Ori. I'm here listening to you.
Okay, so first of all, you already answered my first question about the corona and the connection to the Holocaust. So thank you so much. So there is a couple of questions that people wrote. I'll start with the first one. We have already 6 questions. Take time to answer. The first question is, what did you do after the liberation? I think you said about it, but if you want to expand a little bit more, but they ask what happened after the liberation with you guys. With how many survived?
Okay, should I do it right now?
Yeah, answer, and then we'll go to the next.
From my family, for my immediate family, we lost my father and my youngest brother, who they took, who took in a concentration camp with the children. Selection of children, we had constant selections. He was selected, and we have no trace of him. My father, we have a record of when he was shot. He was shot in Sachsenhausen concentration camp in 1942 as a reprisal for an uprising of Himmler. And we have the exact date from the Red Cross. Germans kept very, of course, from our extended, my mother has lost siblings and their family, but those who were rescued for the most part came to America or to England before the war.
Okay. All right, the next question is, when you left the gas chamber after the Nazis ran out of gas, what was the reaction from all the other hundreds of women?
It was mainly a belief in God, you know, that this was a pure miracle. And we tried to give each other hope, saying that we will survive, because if we survive this, we will survive. But going into the gas chamber, we had no idea at first. We thought we were going into showers. The impression was that we were told to totally undress in order to cleanse ourselves, and we thought we were going into showers. So all our possessions were left outside the crematorium. And when we came out, we got new work clothes, which were those pajamas. None of them fitted properly. They were either too small or too large, and not warm enough or not cold enough. And it was always inadequate. But somehow the human nature is stronger than we give them credit for, and we try to survive. For the most part, those who perished were those that went with their older or younger family members and chose to share their fate, which was the eventual death. After the cancer, when we were handed over to the German villages after the war, we saw there was no future for us in the village, and the Russians were rumored to be approaching, and we wanted to get out of that village. There was no life for us as soon as possible. So we made our way to the closest city, which was Leipzig, Germany. And from there, we went to Buchenwald to connect to Jews and to be able to reconnect with any surviving family members. We didn't have any addresses or anything, so it was a matter of reconstructing any connections that we possibly have, and it was not easy. It was very difficult, but it was possible through the help of a fantastic chaplain in the American Army in Buchenwald by the name of Herschel Schachter, who a historical biography is being written about him. He did a lot for the survivors, and he tried to reconnect them with families in whichever way possible. And this is how, and all of my single friends who were left without family, most of them went to Palestine illegally because no country wanted Jews after the war. There was absolutely nobody that we could go to because borders were closed to everybody, Jewish quotas, including Palestine. So a lot of my friends wound up going illegally to Palestine and being smuggled over and imprisoned in Cyprus, swimming and being helped by the Haggadah. And many of them went to fight for the Israeli state, and many of them perished in that way, and nobody had records of these. They had no family to remember. Okay, go ahead.
Next question is, how do you recommend we teach Israeli elementary school children about the Holocaust?
Say it again, how I did what?
How do you recommend we teach Israeli elementary school children about the Holocaust?
Yes, I don't think they should let them forget. The first thing was they had a chance with the people like me who addressed them, and there probably are not enough people who are able to talk linguistically or make sense at my age, because I'm one of the youngest surviving at this point. And of course, there are a lot of teachers. Yad Vashem does a lot of work in that respect. I took a course on how to address audiences from Yad Vashem. It was productive in Jerusalem. I believe that through books. There's some very good books written. And if you read enough of them, you really get the picture. And I do think if they miss the family, most of them miss their grandparents' tale, because the grandparents either didn't want to couldn't tell, didn't want to tell, or the children didn't want to listen, which is all the same. They did not learn it from their family. And some of those that learned it from the family were overburdened with it. Second generation Holocaust survivors, some of the children were overburdened. I personally could never talk about the Holocaust, as compared to my sister, who never stopped talking about the Holocaust, and her children grew up with it every day. My children learned from school and from books, not from me. Couldn't talk about it. And the only time that I started to talk about it was after I saw Schindler's List, Steven Spielberg movie. I was so touched by the story, even though it didn't involve me at all, that I felt that I was called on. My conscience told me I have to bear witness and talk about it. Then I made an effort to try and speak to people, and I've been trying to speak for the past 20 years at least. And I think the more I read about the Holocaust, everybody has a different story. Every story is relevant. Every story is true. Every story should be published. My sister, my late sister, Judy Becker, who her whole life spent on learning how to write, creative writing. She got a master's in that. She was writing her whole life a story. I hope it will come out through a son, Ephraim David Becker, and his wife, who are trying to reconstruct her manuscript. And she was 2 years older than I, with a much better memory. And her book will be excellent when it comes out. I believe that the children should be told. This Pesach especially, I had such a feeling that Jews never escape. I was, like so many of us, I was by myself in the senior home where I live, and I made a Seder by myself, and we got our food supply delivered to the door 2 meals a day. And I learned more about the Seder this year than I ever had a chance to learn. I had time to read and learn. And I saw there's really nothing new with the Jews. The Jews have always been persecuted and somehow always survived. It goes back to the time of Moses with Egypt. And when they're speaking about slaves and enslavement and making bricks, it reminded me of such recent history. And now that with the new coronavirus, it seems it's repeating itself, except it doesn't include only Jews. It seems to include the whole world. And let's hope that this Mageva passes us fast, that Rahman is on us. Pity on men to let it pass without too many victims. Let it pass fast. Go ahead. Any more?
Yeah.
Questions that I could answer?
Yeah. There is 3 more questions. Another one is, have you ever returned to Germany?
I have returned to Germany after a lot of, yes, twice I have returned to Germany. Once when I had 2 small children, on my way back to America, we went for 1 year to Israel to try in 1958 to try and settle there, since my husband was in Israel after the war, at the end of the war, and he always talked about going back. So we tried in 1958 we liquidated everything in America. We went with 2 small children to Israel, and we tried to make a living, but it was very hard for my husband to make a living there. So he and his family relocated to Germany to build up a diamond line. And he and his father built up a very good business in diamonds in 58, 59, and he was traveling salesman to deliver Israeli cut diamonds for dollars, which Israel desperately needed. And they built up a good business, traveling and selling the diamonds that were cut in Israel. At the time, small cut diamonds were very popular. That brought me and the children to Frankfurt am Main against my will, but they had to settle me in Europe somewhere after being 1 year in Israel. By the way, I was 1 year in Israel, and I left my whole family in America, so I missed them a lot. And I went reluctantly, but I had to go because I married a man that wanted to go back to Israel. So I knew that was on the horizon. There were a lot of details about that, how I spent the year in Israel. And after some difficulties, I have half a year with 2 small children in Israel, in Tel Aviv. The country got to me, and I loved the country. And I really was ready to stay there if we had been able to make parnasa. But because of that, my husband had to go back to Europe to try and build up a business. But when my son we lived in Frankfurt am Main, where I experienced in 1958-59, again, anti-Semitism on 2 grounds. I experienced anti-Semitism against Jews and against Americans. The cities were being rebuilt by American money, but I spoke German, so and I was obviously looked like an American with my American carriage, and so I understood what the Germans were speaking about, and I felt a great deal of anti-Semitism in Frankfurt am Main in those years against Jews and against the Americans. So I couldn't wait to get out of Germany, and I wanted to go back to America, which we eventually did, to start our son Jeffrey in yeshiva in Eiliai in first grade. And we settled in America. The second time I visited Germany was much later, when we were already retired, and they kept offering free 2 weeks trips with all expenses paid to show. The Germans wanted to show the Jews how nice they are and that we should come back to settle there. So eventually, when we were free of responsibilities, we went there for 10 days or 2 weeks on all expenses paid trip. So we were in Berlin, we were wined and dined, and it was an interesting trip. I saw the cities were being rebuilt, but I had no desire at all to Europe at all. I didn't like Europe. I felt that there were a lot of Jews in Frankfurt am Main at the time, and they were doing rather well, but they were not returnees that originally came from there. Those were mostly Russians, Jewish people, or Israelis who went for Parnassah back from Palestine, Israel, to build their Parnassah in Germany. So it didn't inspire me to stay there at all. I couldn't wait to get out back. And what surprised me really, that Hitler would have turned in his grave if he had seen what I saw in the streets of Frankfurt am Main probably in the 80s. I saw a lot of mixed couples, American soldiers with blonde, blue-eyed German women, and a lot of Orientals and a lot of all kinds of races, which Hitler was trying to purify his race and make an example of the Roman Aryan image. So he would not have been happy with that at all. And I couldn't wait to get out of Israel. So for me, the possibility was always America or Israel, and my children being educated in yeshiva, they drew them to Israel. And my son wanted to settle there, and Jeffrey, of course, did on his own eventually. And we were fortunate enough in our later years to be able to spend a great deal of time in Israel, and I was very happy there. What brought me back to the States was my husband's illness. He needed a fourth operation on his spine, and we needed to be closer to tender loving care, which we have in Muncie, New York. It was the right choice at the time, and my husband lived till the age of 90. We had a very happy 67-year-old long marriage. It could have lasted forever, but we had good years, and he died peacefully with the God at his side and in his own bed here in Muncie. And we did what we could for him, and he knew that, and he died peacefully, leaving behind a good Yerusha. We only had one son and one daughter who brought us a great deal of nachas, and we keep shipping nachas from them. And right now, this is the place where I have to be. I'm provided for in a retirement home. I have my apartment here, and I have my meals here, and I have my darling grandchildren around me, and those that are in Israel are on the phone. I was always going back for Pesach to Israel. This is the first Pesach I spent in America. And there I spoke a great deal. The 2 weeks after Pesach were very busy with me speaking all over the place. I spoke at Yad Vashem. I spoke at the University of Beersheba with Ori and Malki, and I spoke at the Bailan area a lot for Ori and Yael, and I spoke in Yerushalayim with Penina Wandel's scouts, Israeli scouts, and every group. I was well received, and it was my pleasure to talk to them, even though it's always is a great cost to remember the Holocaust like that. But I am very glad. I am prepared for the years that are left to me to publicize my book, to speak with larger audiences wherever I can have access to, wherever I am. And I still say that in Israel, there's more exposure to Jewish history than even in America. I think that the Jewish children get more of both religious information and history, Jewish information, than they do in America. Even in yeshivas here, especially in the frum ones, they're very careful about even Holocaust information. They don't want to scare the children. They don't want to tell them too much. They're protecting them very much, and I don't know if that's wise. I'm not that wise that I know all the answers, but I'm still prepared to continue as long as I have seichel and koiches left to my little share of information, and I'm waiting for the book of Maya to be put out, and that will be a very valuable reading to everybody. So thank you, Ori, and I will end unless you want me to stay on. I'll stay on as long as you need it. I thank you and all your audience and all my grandchildren for wanting to hear me. I thank you so much.
Grandma, we just want to tell you that we got up to 80 people on this call, just to let you know.
Unbelievable. I don't know how you did it in so short a time.
The internet.
I didn't know that they were still interested.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for making it possible, Malki and Ori and all of you. And I have all of these questions that you put to me. They are fascinating and interesting, and it would have taken me more time to go into details of all these questions. Ori presented me with about 9 excellent questions here, and they were all appropriate, and I would have answered them, but I somehow didn't get around to most of them.
It's totally
So
fine.
maybe there'll be another meeting.
Grandma,
In the meantime, your children should go and continue the information.